Hello everyone, welcome to Asura Psych, and today we're going to be talking about INTJs and the problems that they have with being emotionally expressive. Now, if you know anything about INTJs, you're probably likely to know that INTJs aren't known for being emotionally expressive. They're not a very emotional type, and this is because they're an introverted feeling type. But not only are they an introverted feeling type, they're a tertiary introverted feeling type, and this is going to impact how comfortable they feel expressing emotions, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. Let's get into it. Of all the types on average, I would say that the INTJ and the ISTJ are the least likely to be emotionally expressive. And this is because they have, again, tertiary introverted feeling. And you might be asking yourself, well, wouldn't the ESTJ and ENTJ be the least expressive because they have repressed or fourth introverted feeling? And the answer to that is no, because the repressed function plays a larger part in the psyche than the tertiary function, because it is directly oppositional to that dominant function. And what this means is that ESTJs and ENTJs in times of stress will respond with the introverted feeling function, that repressed function, while the INTJ and ISTJ are not likely to respond with this feeling function in times where they are struggling to cope with something. You see, the tertiary function for many is this kind of function that we just keep under lock and key. It's the one that we're very proud of ourselves, but it's one that we're not likely going to show to other people. For example, if you look at ENTPs, they often have a great appreciation for extroverted feeling, but it's not something that they typically want to be known for. Just like INTJs and ISTJs typically have a good deal of introverted feeling, but it's not something that they want to show to other people and be known for. And this is even more so if that tertiary function is introverted, because it's especially private compared to the extroverted tertiary functions. INTJs are also perceiving dominant types, which means they're not judging types. They are an irrational type. They prefer to take in and process information before they make any sort of logical or value-based decision associated with that thing that they're perceiving. So what this means for INTJs is that they're not likely going to respond to something with some sort of value or emotional judgment the moment they interact with it. They are instead going to process it for a while and then give their response. And this causes them to appear especially less emotional than many of the other types, especially if you look at types that lead with feeling functions like INFPs or ESFJs. These types are going to respond first and foremost, usually with some sort of value-based emotional reaction to situations that they are interacting with, while this isn't the case usually for the perceiving dominant types like the INTJ. This becomes even more amplified when you compare the INTJ to, say, the INFJ, who has secondary extroverted feeling, compared to the INTJ, who has tertiary introverted feeling. So not only is the feeling function higher in the INFJ, it's also extroverted. So despite the fact that they're both introverted perceiving dominant types and less likely than a feeling dominant type to respond with some sort of emotional reaction, the INTJ is far less likely than the INFJ even to respond with this type of reaction, because that feeling function is tertiary and introverted. But that just kind of leads to the question, what does all of this mean for the INTJ? Well, all of this essentially means that the INTJ is not going to be a type who's likely to respond very emotionally to situations, even situations that most people would respond to with some sort of emotion, like a family member or friend maybe even passing away. The INTJ might not immediately express those types of emotions. For the INTJ, they're more likely to kind of want to take in and process this information and deal with it when they can on their own. It's very likely and common that INTJs under periods of stress will want to shy away from the rest of the world, go to their own house and room, and really process what they are feeling. They're not going to be the types who want to usually talk about their problems with friends. They need to be able to have that personal alone time to deal with the feelings that they are feeling. And without that, the INTJ is unlikely to be able to process. If you try and approach an INTJ and offer them support in a time of stress or some sort of time when they're feeling something heavily, it's more likely to cause problems for them. It's going to halt the healing process for the INTJ. They need to be able to have that NiFi perceiving feeling relationship going on for a little bit when they are trying to recover from some sort of emotional response. Now, on the flip side of this, a lot of you may have heard the term NiFi loop, or introverted intuition, introverted feeling loop. And this is when the INTJ gets stuck in a process of healing, or they're unable to get over some sort of emotional trauma thing that they're dealing with. And this essentially just means that they're unable to healthily process the thing that they're feeling right now, and they get stuck in this kind of situation. And there's no real way for me to tell you how to get out of an NiFi loop if you're in one. It really just comes down to dealing with the individual situation that you're dealing with. Now, some INTJs may want support in a time of need, but the difference between an INTJ and other types when they are needing support from friends or family is that an INTJ will come to you if they need support emotionally. They're not going to be the ones who want you to come to them to support them in their time of need. They will come to you. And this is, again, really important because if you try and force your support onto an INTJ, it's going to halt the healing process for them. They need to have that time to really perceive and deal with the thing that they are feeling. On the flip side of all of this, it's important to remember that if you're an INTJ, having tertiary introverted feeling doesn't give you a free pass to just be emotionless and cold for the rest of your life. It doesn't give you an excuse to be push-offy towards people who want to interact with you. Learning to be open and accepting towards other people is a good human trait to have. Having basic human compassion and empathy is something that you can develop as an individual. Just because you're not going to be emotionally reactive towards others doesn't mean you can't learn to take the introverted feeling side of your psyche into account when dealing with new situations. I think one of the biggest problems that INTJs face when it comes to tertiary introverted feeling and being emotionally unexpressive is relationships. Many INTJs are going to struggle with romantic relationships because they're not going to be able to show the level of emotional expression that the other person tends to want. Now, this is something that, again, can be learned. INTJs can learn to show the type of support that another type needs from them when it comes to relationships. Now, it isn't always going to be 100% compatible, but you can find that middle ground. I am married to an ENFJ, an extroverted feeling dominant type, and it took me more than 2 years to figure out how I could properly express my feelings for her towards her as a non-expressive person. Now, it's going to differ from person to person, but doing things like acts of service or just being kind in general, doing something that they need done that you don't really want to do, these are great ways to show support and love for people that you appreciate in your life without being emotionally expressive. Finding these types of middle grounds can be a great thing for INTJs. And since INTJs are such great strategists and they tend to think into the future, they can really brainstorm good ways to be productive and helpful towards the people that they care about. Another important thing to remember when you're talking about INTJs and being emotionally expressive and responsive is that Big 5 trait neuroticism is not the same as MBTI type. And what that means is that certain INTJs will have higher or lower levels of neuroticism than certain other INTJs. Now, if we looked at the average neuroticism score of all 16 types, you would likely find that INTJs would be on the lower end, and thus would likely be less emotionally reactive than most other types. But this doesn't mean that INTJs can't have a high neuroticism score, and there are going to be some INTJs who tend to be more anxious and worried than other INTJs. Now, I myself personally as an individual score very lowly on neuroticism, and I'm not likely to respond with emotional reactions towards different situations. But again, this doesn't mean that all INTJs are going to be like that. If you're an INTJ with high neuroticism, it's important for you to kind of take into account how you as an individual need to deal with situations. Having that time to stop and process information can make the anxiousness or worried thoughts that you have go down. Just going to take a quick moment of your time before I wrap up the video to remind you all that I have a new affiliate partner here on the channel, Bones Coffee. Bones Coffee is a coffee company that I've been personally buying from for more than 2 years, so if you'd like to buy some flavored and interesting coffee that I personally endorse and I personally drink, then check the link down in the description box below. Alright everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this discussion on INTJs and their emotional expressiveness and reactiveness. As I said many times in this video, INTJs aren't going to be the most expressive type because of that tertiary introverted feeling. That said, though, I do think that they feel just as strongly as any other type. They're just less likely to show it, and it's something that they tend to keep to themselves in private. They're going to need more time than the average type to process their feelings, and they're going to want to be alone when they do this. So if you're out there and you have someone who you want to support who's an INTJ, they might be in a rough time, let them process their thoughts and feelings. Reach out to them to offer support, but don't try to push your support onto them. If they reach back out, that's when you know that you should interact with them and support them in a more hands-on way. I would like to remind everybody that I do have typing sessions available at my website, asurapsych.com, if you're interested in working with me to find out what your personality type is and what that means for you. This has been Asura at Asura Psych. Have a good one.